The Peaceful Solution Character Education Certification course. Everyone in the auditorium can be seated. Welcome to all of those of you watching online. Once again, we're going to be in the Building Moral Excellence unit. That is the character unit of the high school series, but you know, it's definitely not limited to age. It's limited to education, and we all need education. As William covered last class, that is the number one positive character trait that we all need, and that's becoming educated in positive character, making the right choices, doing things that bring no harm to ourselves, someone else, or the environment. All of those are very important. And so we're going to be picking back up in Procedure 4. William started off and almost completed Procedure 4, but we're going to get back into this and continue where he was at. But we're going to reread the whole procedure, and then we'll pick back up where he left off. So Procedure 4 can be found on Lesson Plan 1, page J. And once again, if you have not downloaded the Building More Excellence unit, you can go onto our Facebook page, the official Peaceful Solution Character Education Incorporated. It's there in the section for the downloads. You can download the character, the acceptance, the self-control, the respect, responsibility, and the Building Moral Excellence unit. It's all there. They're PDF files, so once you download them, they're searchable text. So that will be very helpful for you in teaching your classes and putting lessons together and referencing the books and pulling all this information together. Makes it very easy to use when they're searchable. So here in Procedure 4, it says, explain to students that character is made up of specific traits that can be categorized as positive or negative. Negative traits, such as aggression and retaliation, can result in poor interaction as well as harm to oneself and others. In contrast, positive traits, such as honesty and respect, support moral principles. Have students brainstorm additional character traits and categorize them as positive or negative. Ideas can be recorded on the board. After the brainstorming activities, have the class turn to the scenarios entitled The Building Blocks of Character and Positive Character Traits, found on pages 19 through 20. Now, William has already covered that, so if you want to see that part of the procedure, I refer you back to the last class that was given. Now, allow students time to review the positive character traits as listed in the chart with the list on the board. The activities found on pages 21 through 24 can be assigned as homework. So we're going to go back and start on page 21. You see there on page 20 all of the positive character traits that are listed, and of course William covered those and went over them. And this is something that you need to engage. You know, if you're a parent, cover these things with your child. If you're a teacher, go over these things with your students. And as we move forward, we're going to see how these emotions can tie into building these positive character traits. And we learned that in the first chapter of the acceptance unit, where we talked about negative emotions, or this negativity that we can put off, can also feed into our character. But positivity, you hear people talk about positive energy, you know, and you hear people talk about, oh, that person's toxic, you know, because they're negative and they're always spreading negativity, bringing everyone down. Well, if you look through these positive character traits, all the way from educated to decisive, there's nothing in these positive character traits that can bring harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment. There's nothing in there that brings someone down. There's nothing in there that would ruin your day, so to speak. All of these things are what society desires to see. Now, when society desires to see these things, that means those who desire to see them should be doing those things themselves. That's what we should be doing. This should be an examination chart for us. And of course, you had there where it was a list of traits. You would read them carefully and check column A if they're a part of your character. Check column B if you would like to develop these traits. And I think, you know, for all of us, you're going to find that we all want them, but we're all still developing them. You know, becoming educated, I don't know if that's something you ever stop doing. You know, it's something that you continually grow in every day. And there's different situations. You can be put into different environments, engage with different people, and these things will actually help with your education. So looking over to page 21, William had covered the section where it was telling us to take a closer look. And the first one was humility, then loyalty, and then patience and self-control. And that's where William left off after reading the patience and self-control. You know, and he showed that slide that showed the, watering of the tree or the plant. And of course, as the author said, I said it when we first started this book, when we were talking about teaching the books in order, how you can't eat of the fruit of the tree until you plant the tree. And then you got to grow and nurture the tree, and then you can partake of it. And, when you think about that, if you've never grown a fruit tree, you should research it a little bit. You don't plant a fruit tree and then the next year you get to go eat the fruit. It takes quite a few years before the fruit tree starts putting forth fruit that's actually worth eating or you can eat. It takes some maturing, it takes some growth, and it takes some nurturing. And if you have fruit trees in West Texas, it takes a lot of nurturing and a lot of care when you're in 110-degree weather. It's not like other places where, it's a sunny day. Well, what's it going to be? It's going to be rain or it's going to be sunny, but the temperature is always 85. It's not like that here. Here you don't know if it's going to melt the plastic on your porch or what's going to take place. But that's the way it gets here. And I know it gets hotter in other places. But looking here to number 4, to be steadfast and persistent. And it says a steadfast person has the strength, willpower, and determination not to give up once a positive decision, goal, or purpose has been established. Let me read that one more time. So a steadfast person has the strength, willpower, and determination not to give up once a positive decision, goal, or purpose has been established. Now, once again, remember what we learned in the acceptance unit, calling these things back to your mind. Remember that a goal that is a positive goal is a realistic goal, is something that's actually attainable. You can't have this goal of something that in reality is never going to be achieved. You can't have the goal of, I just want to be a millionaire. How are you going to do it? I'm going to buy a lottery ticket every day. That's not very realistic. There's a lot of disappointed people. But you do help someone else become a millionaire. That's true. Your money that you buy to pay for the lottery ticket does help someone become a millionaire. Or it's you put yourself in a situation to where the outcome could never take place. It's like you want to grow corn, so you go out on an asphalt road and throw your seeds on the asphalt road. And boy, I hope my corn comes up. You might get popcorn in the state of Texas, but that's all you'll get. So you have to take the environment and everything else that goes with it, and you have to put those things together and make sure that your goal is positive. I remember being very young when I worked in a restaurant when I was like 16 years old, and I remember every day I would get off at 11 o'clock. I would drive by the Pontiac dealership to look at that brand new GTA Trans Am they had sitting out there. And I had a car, it drove just fine, but boy, I really wanted that new GTA Trans Am. And I remember back then, the sticker on it was $21,000, and I thought, man, who in the world could come up with $21,000? And I used to sit and figure out on paper how I was going to come up with the money making $3.35 an hour, and I just knew that eventually I'd come up with that money. In reality, by the time I come up with that money, I would want to do something else besides buy a car that would have been sold 3 years before I ever come up with the money. And that was something, it was more of a want than a need. Never had it. Never even considered buying it after it sold. But boy, when it sat there in the car lot, I just had to have it. But that wasn't something realistic. That wasn't something that was being steadfast and persistent about. But there were other things that I wanted to do. One that I still do today, which was learning how to design furniture. When I was 17 years old, I wanted to learn how to do it. But I wanted to learn from someone that had been doing it. I wanted to learn on-hand training. And that's what I did. And I eventually was able to talk one of the head designers in North Carolina to train me. And I spent every afternoon after I got off work in the furniture factory from 7 to 4:30, I would go to his factory he had, and I would work there from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And I did that for years to learn how to design furniture because I wanted to know how to do it. I didn't want, this ideology of it. I really wanted to know how to do it. What makes it work? Why do you do it that way? And I was really blessed enough to find someone that was willing to teach me. And I still use that to this day. It's something that I'm very grateful and thankful that I was able to experience and learn. But if we could show our first slide, this is a slide that you see a lot. And believe it or not, I have seen this poster hanging in a lot of people's places that gave up. Rooms, businesses, where people gave up. And I'm going to continue. Leave that slide up, but I'm going to continue reading this while that slide is up. It says, a person who is steadfast will apply consistent effort to accomplish any task they have set out to do, regardless of the setbacks. For example, a person who is determined to develop a positive character will consistently uphold moral principles even when confronted with negative peer pressure. And that slide, it has a very in-depth meaning to it when you look at it. The man worked so hard, got so close, and then just gave up and walked away. And while he's walking away, there's someone else that's willing to take that. And it can be a position in a business. It can be some kind of position you've qualified for, even something that your mom and dad has given you, some kind of privilege or some kind of responsibility because you've qualified yourself. But when you give up on one thing, it starts affecting everything else. And when we're not steadfast and persistent, let's say towards wanting to achieve whatever it might be in someone's life, but let's say it's something positive. And when you start giving up on your goals, it usually starts trickling down, and you start, what's the reason? Why should I even care? What's the purpose to even do this? And you forget why you started to begin with. And when you look at that slide right there, that man walking away does not make any of the work he did any less. It just makes it worthless. Everything that he did was for nothing. And we can find ourselves in that situation a lot in life, and being steadfast and persistent is something that a lot of people experienced here during COVID. Especially schools went through a whole lot of, things that they never experienced before. Tests and trials. There was a lot of schooling from home, Skype and other services where you were doing video conferencing and teaching. That skyrocketed, and that's become the norm now. People kind of went that way and they didn't leave it. We do a lot of peaceful solution classes now because of that. And that was one of the ways the peaceful solution was steadfast and persistent in making sure we didn't stop doing the things that we had already set out to do. And a lot of the classes went from being in person to being done virtually. And now to this day, they're done virtually. In fact, here in the next, it's about a month and a half, we're going to have our fall seminar. And there's a lot of things that we're going to show that have been worked on for virtual classes that you'll be very interested to see, that helps open up more on a global scale. Technology and artificial intelligence is a wonderful thing when used properly. And it's amazing what you can do with it. And it helps the class we're teaching right now, the classes that William taught while we were out of the country. All of these classes, imagine where you can actually teach one class and people from all around the world can watch it, listen to it, and understand it. It's a really miraculous thing, but that's one thing that we as an organization, we are steadfast and persistent in trying to get this to everyone, because we realize not everyone even has internet. But I know there's people watching right now or that will be watching later this week, because one person will download the class in villages in the most remote places in Kenya, in Nigeria, where they're out of power right now, where you basically, when it's nighttime, the power goes away. They have, load shedding, which is where they cut the power. If you don't have a generator, you don't have electricity. Places in Ghana where they actually hold classes under a tree. Places in Colombia and Mexico where the classes are held outside in the street. All around the world, In many different places, people are coming together to learn how to develop this. And that's showing steadfast and persistence in their determination in learning how to do and build a positive character. And I tell you, people like that are an example to everyone. And whenever you think you have it hard, whenever you think you have it difficult, man, there's always someone else that will really humble you just by looking at what they go through and what they experience in their life. And there's always someone there that can do that. But when you're talking to your classroom, your students, usually if you ask people in their junior year, even their senior year, ask them, what do you want to do? I'm going to go to college. Well, what are you gonna major in? I have no idea. I just want to go to college. Well, what do you want to do for a career? I have no idea. I just want to go to college. How are you going to pay for it? Oh, that's my mom and dad's job. That's not mine. And it just assumed that all of these things work out and will go that way. And sadly, you can ask someone, well, you got your college degree? Yep. Where do you work at? McDonald's. Why? Well, everybody's got a college degree. You got to fight for a job now. And it's not just in the United States these things are taking place. This is going on around the world. So when you're steadfast and persistent, make sure your goals are realistic and check to make sure that it's going to be beneficial, that it's a long-term thing. Developing a positive character, you can never go wrong. Last you a lifetime. Wanting to do certain things, like you see here, it says, which one of the following best describes your future goals? Graduating from high school, pursue a career in sports. Very, very few people. If you ever have students that say they want to do that, there's a study online you can get, and you can take the best athletes in the world. And here in the United States, I think the most popular sport is probably American football. I know you have football, but I'm talking about American football. And you see all of these college athletes that are supposed to be phenomenal in college, and then they graduate and they all want to go to the draft, or they go undrafted and they still join the NFL. And then you look at the percentages of players that actually make it to the NFL, and then look at the percentage of players that actually last past a few years. It's very slim. A lot of them get severe injuries that last them a lifetime. They don't make the multi-million dollars, They don't get all of those things you see in the news where they're, I won't show up unless I'm getting $140 million for 4 years or whatever. I heard one player one time who signed an $80 million contract and said he couldn't afford to feed his family on his salary. And I was like, man, what does your family eat? Must be eating money, $1,000 bills a day. But this is the mindset. So you have to be realistic once again. Are there people who make it there? Of course there are. Are there a lot of them? No. The odds are very, very, very slim. I went to high school, and I played on a football team with the person, when I was in high school, he was the fastest person in North Carolina. He held the record for the 40-yard dash. And he went straight to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He became a wide receiver. The first punt return he went to take back, when he called it, someone hit his knee and destroyed his knee. Never played football again. That's how fast his career went away. And his idea was he was going to the NFL. That's what he wanted to do. He was so fast, his nickname was Flash. That's what they called him. And I'd never seen anybody so fast in my life, but I remember watching him get his knee tore out, and I thought, man, that went away really quick. Everything he worked for, all of his dreams are gone now. Totally gone. Well, you can also attend college, go to trade school, which, if you don't know much about trade schools, become knowledgeable. Trade schools, people make a lot of money. There are people coming out of trade schools making more than physicians and doctors now. That's here in the United States. Get married and start a family. That's another great goal. Just don't plan on a divorce. You have to be steadfast and persistent. Make sure you know what you're doing, you're getting yourself into, and know that you need to see it through. You want to go to graduate school or do something else, but once again, make sure it's a realistic goal. And then put forth the determination, to get these things done. And you notice on the next page here, page 23, it says, how can steadfast and persistence help you to achieve goals that you have indicated? And of course, the answers will vary, but the main one here that we're focusing on with the peaceful solution we're recommending is I can remain focused amidst distractions that are contrary to my goals. And once again, don't forget, those are realistic goals. You have to do things that are realistic. If they're not realistic, you're setting yourself up for failure. Going on to the next slide, I want to recall you back to this because this is where, remember education being the #1 positive character trait, and this is from page 11 of the acceptance unit, and it was entitled Knowledge is Power. And it said, taking your education seriously is another way you can demonstrate that you are a unique individual with moral potential. So that means you have the ability to do it, and you're showing it. You have a responsibility to continuously pursue positive moral ways to improve yourself. Getting a sound education is one way you can do this. In addition to your basic subjects of English, social studies, mathematics, and science, a sound moral education will assist you in being aware of what is going on in your community, nation, and world. Well-informed people are knowledgeable about the world around them. They pay attention to influences around them. They gather all the facts, then test and prove what is correct before making a decision. Ironically, many teens report that youths who are smart are picked on. They're often called nerds and geeks. Hey, as hurtful as those names might be, what is even worse is neglecting your education. Be smart, studious, and aware of what is going on around you. People who are informed and noticed and determined to maintain a positive moral character will not jeopardize their safety, health, or future. So very important to remember that. And then going on to the next slide, this is all being, put on determination with steadfast and persistent. And this is from the self-control unit, page 87. And it was entitled, There is a Purpose to It All. Because if you're going to be steadfast and you're going to be persistent and you're going to be determined, you have to remember what the purpose was. What was the reason you even started this? If you ever lose sight of the goal, if you ever lose the purpose of what you were doing and the flame that's burning for you to achieve it, everything else just falls by the wayside. And it says to have purpose in life means to have a positive direction in which to grow and mature. Knowing your purpose helps you to know what you want to do with your life. How can you tell if there is purpose in someone's life? Look to see if they are motivated and determined to accomplish things. People with purpose strive to learn all they can about a particular subject so they can know best how to proceed. This requires education, not just in a classroom, but also in real-life situations. It is up to you to determine your purpose and to make choices that will help you succeed in achieving your purpose. And last but not least, going on to the next slide, remembering optimism. You can be optimistic or pessimistic. And remember the positive emotions that we read on page 32 in the self-control unit. Optimism meant to expect the best possible outcome, being determined to stand on morally right principles, knowing that you have morally right standards. With all of those things together, though, you have to be, once again, realistic, and you have to be determined. When you're determined, that means you do the job completely. You don't halfway do a job. You don't start something and expect the results without seeing it through. If you do that, you didn't fulfill your job. You didn't fulfill your goal. You didn't accomplish your purpose. And it's just like when we set out to do something, there's nothing wrong if there's a group effort to do something. But make sure that you do your part in whatever has to be done, and that brings in, completeness. It brings in a unity. It brings in positive, building up of these building blocks of a positive character together amongst many people. And it really builds like that society we read about in the character unit with the ripple effect. These things will ripple outwardly. But if you bring everyone together and you do your job halfway, when it crumbles, you have to start looking, well, where did it break? Where did it fall apart? How did it not work? And eventually you start finding out, well, this is why it didn't work, and you have to fix it. So we have to be willing, if we're part of that, to do what we need to do to correct it. You know, if something ever breaks or it doesn't work properly or it falls apart, we just need to fix it, get it corrected, and move on. Talking about the problem for the next 50 years will never help. You know, it's something that we do here in America. The United States, we tend to do that constantly. It's taking place right now in presidential campaigns. It seems like if you look cross-eyed at a girl when you were in school at 5 years old, that's going to come out on the news. It's some of the most absurd things you've ever seen, but of course that's what we see. Well, when you think about these things and this steadfast and persistent in accomplishing the goals, getting in here to the next one is forgiveness. And this is something we've covered. We're going to look back at a couple slides, but we're going to read this first because forgiveness is something that it's a must. It's required. If we don't, we'll always have something that's holding us back. And it says, forgiving others when they have hurt your feelings or even physically harmed you is probably one of the most difficult things you will ever do. To develop a moral character, you must learn to remove all thoughts of anger, hatred, resentment, and ill will against anyone who has physically or emotionally harmed you. Did you know that if you refuse to forgive someone for a wrongdoing, you would eventually cause harm to yourself? You can become so absorbed in reliving the incident that caused you hurt that you can miss out on the joys that life can offer. A forgiving person can learn from his or her experiences and use them to benefit his or her life or the lives of others. You know, and one thing that we have to recall, and your mind should immediately go back, where it talks about reliving these incidents over and over and over. And I take you back here to the self-control unit on the next slide, and it's entitled The Choice is Yours, and it's page 111 of the self-control unit. And this was a very important page. We spent a lot of time going over this because this is about part of forgiveness, but once again, the choice is ours. If we don't forgive someone, that's our choice. But it's extremely important if we want to succeed and move forward in life and accomplish goals. We're going to have to, because there's always going to be situations where someone you feel could be real, could be imaginary. Remember disrespect, the four different types of disrespect: real, imaginary, intentional, and unintentional. And that's the respect unit, page 117 is where we read about that. When these things take place, we have to realize that we can't let that hold us back. We have to continue to do the job. And that might mean you have to continue to do more to get the job done, but it has to be done. If you want to accomplish the goal, you do whatever it takes to get the job done within acting in a moral and positive way. You never do something that's immoral to try to accomplish a goal. But the choice is yours. It says it takes courage and strength of character to practice self-control when you're being deliberately provoked. You must set your mind in advance to use positive communication and respond peacefully when you are being antagonized. Once you have responded appropriately and found a peaceful solution, give yourself credit for having made the right choice to avoid a crisis situation, and then notice in bold italicized letters, let it go. Don't replay it. Don't relive it, as we just read. You know, if we want to be forgiving someone, we have to let it go. And then continuing on here on page 111 on the next slide, it says, don't replay the incident over and over in your mind. If the person who antagonized you caused you to feel embarrassed or afraid, then deal honestly with these emotions by talking about it with a friend or a trusted adult. You can go to a counselor, a guidance counselor, go to your teacher, go to a parent, go to someone to talk about it. If you hold on to these emotions, you could begin to have negative thoughts about yourself and about the person you had the conflict with. This will cause you to feel frustrated and resentful. If you are not careful to guard your mind and focus on the negative incident, you could seek to get revenge. Holding on to the emotional pain of anger or frustration will cause you trouble in the long run. You could end up exploding at others in rage. When you reach your breaking point, remember rage is anger that is uncontrolled. or you could direct the rage at yourself and suffer from stress-induced headaches, stomach aches, or other health problems. You could end up trying to hurt yourself, or worst of all, commit suicide. Don't let this occur to you. You know, and all of these things that we're talking about here, this is the outcome of not forgiving not only yourself, but others. We're very quick to forgive ourselves when something goes wrong. I remember the author of The Peaceful Solution telling us a story in a teacher's meeting one time, and he was talking about his daughter, and he said he had, 20 or 30 coffee cups. But he seen his daughter washing one, and he thought, man, that is my most honored cup. I really love drinking from that cup. And he said no longer than he thought about that, something occurred and it slipped right out of her hand. And he said he watched that cup and it very slowly, even though it was, real time, he said it was like it was slow motion. And he was telling himself, if that cup breaks, I tell you what, I'll never be able to find a cup that great again. And he said it hit the floor and it broke and he went all to pieces. Just lost it. And he said the very next day he was washing dishes and he was making an example to her. And as he was washing, yes, he told her, now this is now my best cup. He said, lo and behold, it slipped out of his hand. And as it was heading to the floor, he said he was thinking to himself, that's all right, I can get another cup. It's not that bad. He said he forgave himself before that cup ever hit the floor. And when it hit the floor and it broke, she was waiting for him to explode. And she realized that he forgave himself so quickly, it was, there's more cups. Look at all these cups. And she reminded him, you didn't think that way yesterday. And it was an example. He was telling us how your children can teach you. Your children can really point things out and they can help you. And as a parent or even a teacher, we can never be too proud, too arrogant, or uneducated to want to learn something. But, he said, I've never forgot that. And I always realized, and I always tried to put forth now, him speaking, that when something went wrong, how would I feel if it was me that caused it to go wrong? Because if you've ever done something that destroys someone else's property, you feel really bad about it. It's not like you go off, if you've done it unintentional. I know there's people that destroy people's property and they don't care. That's not positive at all. But if you're talking about a person that's trying to do the job to their best ability and something breaks, how would you feel if it was you? Or if you misunderstood something and you tried to do a job with your best ability and then you get to the end, I'm like, oh no, how did I miss this? And everything else falls to the wayside because, well, I didn't get everything done the way I thought I did. Well, then you have to go back and just fix whatever it is that was broken. But before you lose it on someone else, before you start screaming and yelling at someone else, before you start acting like, whatever they did was the end of the world, remember you're going to cause the end of the world too here in the next couple of days for someone else. So keep everything in context. And if something got broke, fix it. If it's irreparable, find out a solution. What is the most peaceful solution to deal with it? And realize not everything is always going to go the way we want it to go. Just remember, if you're given a responsibility, make sure that you follow the rules that you were given that govern you in doing your job, and try to get everyone that you work with to fall within those rules. But if something goes outside of those rules, just find a way to bring them back into compliance. And I'm not saying that you got to grab a hammer and start hitting fingers. We have to work together in getting things done. If it's broke, fix it. If you have a leaky water line and everybody talks about the leaky water line and it floods the house and everybody's still griping about the leaky water line, well, somebody's got to eventually go turn the water line off. That's before you even fix it. Somebody's got to do it. So we have to be steadfast, persistent, be forgiving of others. Don't overreact. Don't act like something, well, I guess the whole world's going to crumble today just because that person won't go do this. One thing that the author of The Peaceful Solution told me, and I've never forgot it. If you ever feel that someone else has got to do something for you to do your job, you need to get off your lazy and do something. If you really think someone else has got to do something for you to accomplish your goal, you've got something mixed up. You do your part and everything else will work out, but you concentrate on doing your part and everything else will work out. And, that's one thing in life. And when you're talking about steadfast and persistent, and you think about what everybody went through with COVID, not just schools, but businesses, this was an experience for everyone. And think about how, now you see in the news, COVID spreading everywhere, new variant. It seems like this is the 500th new variant. Promises of it going away. Well, you see how those worked out. It's like it's here to stay for now. But you don't see people shutting down. You don't see all of the things we've seen in 2020 and into 2021. I remember going into hardware stores and they had clickers on their hands counting how many people were in the door, and they were counting how many people were leaving. You could only have so many people in the store. You had to have a certain distance between each other, and now they come out and admit that, well, we don't even know if that worked or not. Well, you have to be very forgiving of people that were steadfast and persistent. They were doing what they thought was right. But of course, it made hardship. A lot of people went out of business. A whole lot of people. I know a lot of people, personally, I know a lot of people that went out of business. Not only because of COVID, but because they let themselves get into these, COVID hurt your business, come get a loan from the government today. And man, it was so easy. But then they realized that was a loan just to keep your business afloat. You didn't make money with it. It just kept you alive. And now you got to pay it back. And it didn't really make you any money. A lot of people suffered because they made some really bad decisions. And it takes some years to get out of it. And you feel sorry for people that get caught up into that because they were really trying to do the right thing to the best they knew. But you get caught up into it and you have to move forward. But speaking of someone that was steadfast and persistent and someone that had to practice forgiveness, this is a story, and this, if you've never read about this man's life, we're only going to read a brief part of this man's life. And, of course, we're reading the following excerpt from the book, Unlimited Power, A Black Choice by Anthony Robbins. And if you could put up the next slide, you'll actually get to see this is Joseph McClendon. Joseph McClendon III. This is the actual man that this story is talking about. And you'll notice a motorcycle there that's tore all to pieces. And of course, you see that he looks pretty successful, and he is. He's actually a neuropsychologist now. He's a motivational speaker. He's a musician, plays numerous musical instruments. Very successful man. But at the age of 17, he had a very horrible experience, and that would have been around 1970. Joseph McClendon was born in 1953, and of course, back in the 60s and 70s, racism was a little strong. You just got into desegregation of the schools in the late 60s. And of course, there still was a lot of, I call it ignorance of society, where people were determined the quality because of the color of their skin. That was supposed to determine the quality of a person. I would like to think that in 2024, we've got past that ignorance, but we haven't, and not in society. It's still there, where people will identify someone by either quality or nationality. That will determine, or by skin color or nationality, that will determine the quality of a person. And that's just not right. In fact, to do that, you're a very uneducated person to think that. And there's nothing that proves that. The United States is known as the superpower, the #1 country in the world. And yet, when you rank the education of the United States, it's like 8th or 9th or 10th. So here we have the most of everything, but our education is lacking. Well, here's the story about Joseph McClendon. And I'll read off the slide first, and just so you have a little bit about him. It was Joseph McClendon was born in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, to Joseph and Avery McClendon, and was raised in Hickam Air Force Base in Oahu, Hawaii. McClendon has 3 siblings. He is the second eldest amongst them. When McClendon was 17 years old, he was attacked by 3 racist people. And that's the story we're going to read, and that's what we're concentrating on tonight. But there's much more to his life. After McClendon, he became homeless. After he was attacked by these people, he became homeless. He spent this time in Lancaster, California. While McClendon was homeless, a stranger gave him the book Think and Grow Rich, which inspired him to become a motivational speaker and performance coach. On his 19th birthday, this was 2 years after this incident took place, McClendon nearly lost his life in a motorcycle accident. So you think about it, the man was beaten severely at 17, almost killed at 19, but yet he's become a very successful person by, being steadfast and persistent and forgiving. And let's read this story about Joseph McClendon and what he went through here. It said, Joseph McClendon had been riding his motorcycle in the early hours of a cold winter morning when his bike broke down. Having no other choice, he pulled into a closed gas station to try and repair his bike. As he was making the repairs, a truck pulled into the gas station and from it proceeded 3 white men. Thinking that they would offer him a hand, Mr. McClendon was glad to see them. However, his relief soon turned to fear as they stumbled from the truck, drunk and calling him derogatory names. Amidst their drunken slurs, the men began to punch, hit, and kick Mr. McClendon for no other reason than he was black. Mr. McClendon survived the injuries he sustained that night, but the men were never apprehended. So think about that. Let that picture draw in your mind. Here's a black man broke down, just looking for help or assistance. The only difference between him and the other men, he was black. You have 3 white men that get out, and instead of helping him, one, they're drunk, so they're not really practicing positive character or self-control. 2, they immediately start hitting and kicking and punching this man. And remember, racism is taught. You're not born racist. Racism is taught. Or it's the lack of teaching. It can be kind of sought after 2 different ways. If someone sees something and they're not taught, it's wrong. So here, these 3 men start beating this man because he's a different color of skin, and they were never caught. They pretty much got by with it as far as law enforcement's considered. Well, eventually Mr. McClendon was able to return to work. However, he soon realized that although the incident was over and his physical injuries were healing, he was allowing the memories of that night to affect his life. He writes, outside I was happy, ambitious by most people's standards. I was completely steeped in the memory of what had occurred to me. I was angry, bitter, and extremely sarcastic despite an upbringing that stressed fairness and harmony. I felt the seeds of prejudice germinating in my own gut. It sickened me to what I was becoming. For the first time in my life, I found myself reacting to color and culture instead of character. So he actually found himself becoming like the men who beat him because of the resentment and the reliving, the reacting in his mind. It was truly affecting not only, as we say in the Peaceful Solution, it was affecting his heart and mind. It was affecting his decision making. It was affecting even how he viewed others. He goes on to say, I was guilty of the very process that caused those men to attack me viciously without cause. I didn't want that event to shape the rest of my life. I didn't want to live the rest of my days filled with self-doubt and vengeance. Mr. McClendon sought the help of his friend Anthony Robbins to learn steps to forgiveness and letting go of the past. Learning to let go of the past was like a new lease on life for Mr. McClendon. He regained control of his life and stopped allowing emotions like hatred, anger, and retaliation to affect his relationships. Today, Mr. McClendon has become a lecturer on the power of positive thoughts, attitude, and letting go of the past. No longer does his life revolve around that cold winter night when he was viciously beaten for no other reason than his skin color. He now uses his experience to teach others that there is power in forgiveness. And once again, you can read about this man. You can actually Wikipedia this man. He has a Wikipedia page. And once again, he ended up going to London State University, became a motivational speaker, a philanthropist. He's an author, and he also became a neuropsychologist. But he took everything that he had experienced and seen what it was doing to him, and he decided to refocus that, realign that, to take the things that he was doing wrong, and this is something the Peaceful Solution really stresses. If you do something that was wrong, If you did something you shouldn't have done, don't harbor it inside. Go to a trusted adult, a guidance counselor. If you're someone that seeks spiritual advisors, go to a spiritual advisor if that's what you deem and that's what you feel important. But go talk to someone about what went wrong, and work it out. Whatever it is that's broken can be fixed. But you have to, it's kind of like when we were growing up and you broke something that belonged to your mom and dad and you kind of put it back on the shelf and you're like, oh, hopefully nobody will notice it. And then the next day, who broke this? And you're like, oh, I thought it would fix itself or something. No, it's never going to fix itself. I remember breaking stuff and my dad showing me how easy it was to fix. And he told me, he said, don't lie about it, just fix it. And I remember I broke something that belonged to him one time and I put it back on the bookshelf. It was a trophy that he had gotten from many years ago. And he already knew, out of the three of us, if something got broke, he pretty much knew who did it. And he just told me, he said, if you tell me, we can fix it. But if you don't tell me anything, it just stays broke. And that's the same thing with what the Peaceful Solution and the author of the Peaceful Solution has put in, our minds to help us understand, if you do something that's wrong, just fix what you broke. That's the most important thing. Until you fix what's broke, it's always going to be broke, and it's never going to work properly. And that starts with ourselves. When we do something that breaks ourselves, whether mentally or physically, we have to fix it. Well, looking back here on page 24 and considering Mr. McClendon and what he experienced, the first question that you want to ask your classroom is, how did Mr. McClendon's experience change his character? And of course, notice before Mr. McClendon was attacked, he was tolerant of others. He was actually glad to see three white men getting out of a truck. Color wasn't part of his thinking at that time. And then, of course, after the attack, he became distrustful, vengeful, and full of hate. Put yourself into that situation. How would you feel if that had occurred to you? If that had occurred to you, how would you feel? How would you perceive others at that time? And then here, B, how did learning to forgive change Mr. McClendon's life? Answers might include, by learning to forgive, he was able to let go of the past, he regained control of his life, and stopped allowing hatred and anger and retaliation to affect his relationships. And that's one thing, that relationships are affected by these things we experience also. And then here, last but not least, number 6, reliable and reliability. And it says a reliable person can be counted on to uphold both written and verbal agreements. Now, I want you to think about this to yourself. You don't have to raise your hand. Just think about it. How many people have ever made an agreement with someone and that person failed to uphold the agreement they made with you? You could start counting them off probably. Oh, I remember this one and that one and this one and that one and this one. But now you have to ask yourself, how many verbal agreements did you make with others and you failed to uphold the verbal agreement? I don't really remember any of those, Kind of skipped my mind. I forgave myself like the coffee cup before I ever did it. I forgave myself. Well, one thing we have to remember, that in the verbal agreements, remember, if you tell someone, I'll pick you up tomorrow at 7, and if they're waiting outside at 6:30, this is something you really feel bad about when a person gets up early so they don't make you late. And you tell them I'll be there at 7, they're out there at 6:30, 6:45 waiting on you, and you show up at 7:15. And that person's thinking, well, I was trying to make sure I was 15, 30 minutes early, and here you are 15 minutes late. But I've been places, there's certain countries I've been to, and I know there's a teacher watching right now who's probably laughing. Because there's a certain country that I go to, if someone tells you they'll be there at 8, don't expect them till 10, 11, or 12. It's just the way that works in that country. I have no idea why, but if they say 8, that translates to 12. But don't expect them until then. That's just the way it works. But think about our agreements, and whether it can be something, hey, can you pick this up for me? Sure. That's one thing that when you try to do a lot of stuff and you have a lot of people you're dealing with, one of the hardest things is learning to tell someone, I can't do that. I'm sorry, I just can't do it. You don't want people to think bad about you, but you realize if you have so many people you're telling, yeah, I'll get it done. Don't worry, I'll pick it. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that too. Yeah, I'll get that done. You're not going to remember all that stuff. You better start writing it down. You better put alerts in your phone. And then you find out you better make it a full-time job. And then one thing you really need to do, I can't say this enough. If you're someone that is working a full-time job, don't obligate yourself to all of these other things that you can't possibly get done. There's plenty of people not working many hours that have a lot of time on their hands that can do a lot of things too. Don't ever feel like you're the only one that can get things done. If you can't get something done, don't be afraid to tell someone, I won't be able to get that done. Just let them know. That way they're not expecting something. But here it says, an agreement is anything you have said that you would do. In other words, an agreement is a promise that can either be verbalized or written, as in a contract. People who are reliable are also trusted and respected. Others know that they can be depended on and put their full assurance in them. And looking over here to the side, this is actually a quote from one of the teachings of the author of The Peaceful Solution. He was referring back in the 1930s and 40s when he was born. And it said, did you know that there was a time when written contracts were not even necessary? A person's word or a handshake was enough to seal an agreement. Now, that's what he even taught us this in teachers' meetings, but he also told us, whatever you do, get it in writing, because in these days, people forget things as fast as they say them. Now, that doesn't mean if your wife says she's going to cook spaghetti for dinner, you get that in writing, okay? It doesn't mean that. It means if you're making a financial agreement, if you're buying something, you're selling something, if you're going to do something that has some value upon it, that could lead to a theft or something like that, you need to do that. But I'll also show you something else that's very important that the instructor, the author of The Peaceful Solution, taught us. If you and students need to pay attention to this. Children need to pay attention to this. If you worked with the author of The Peaceful Solution, and if he gave you an instruction and asked you to do something, he left it on you to write down what he instructed you to do. And then I had the habit, everybody that worked with him in the creation of this and the teachers that were being trained when he was training teachers, we always had notepads we carried in our pocket. Always. You always had a notepad and a pen. And when he gave you an instruction, whether we were going to a city, meeting with a country, meeting with dignitaries, we would write down instructions. And I would always repeat back to him what I wrote down. And I would ask him, is this understanding what you told me? And he would tell me yes or no, or he would change his mind. And, even in my business, when customers come in, it's my job to write down what they're telling me because I'm the one doing the work. I write down detail because in my store, you'll have 500 jobs at one time. And if you think you're going to remember all 500 jobs, there's no way. You'll have a mess. You'll have this person's fabric on this person's furniture, and it'll just be, you'll be out of business pretty quick. So everything has to be written down so you make sure you understand what a person wants. And going to the next slide, there's some things that are reliable. Sunrise and sunset. That's going to take place every day. Pretty much guaranteed. The sun is very reliable. It comes up and it goes down. Another thing that you want to be reliable, a fuel gauge. If you've ever been in a car that says a quarter tank and you run out of gas, you realize how upsetting it is. And I've done it in the middle of a country road before, and it was supposed to have a quarter tank. Your speedometer. Anyone ever been pulled over and, I could have swore I was going 60. No, you were going 80, young man. Well, I could have swore it was 60. Well, everybody always blames the speedometer, right? Well, I'm going to go to court and fight this. My speedometer must be off. And then, of course, the one thing that keeps us reliable is our alarm clock. Unless you're someone that can wake up without one. And I know people to this day, my father was somebody, didn't use an alarm clock. He was so used to waking up at between 5 and 5:15, he just woke up. I don't care what time he went to bed, if he worked to midnight that night, or if he went to bed at 10 o'clock that night, he woke up between 5 and 5:15. How he did that, I have no idea. But I do realize that that's a habit you develop. And, of course, being reliable is something that everyone wants to deal with when dealing with someone. You want to deal with someone that's reliable. And I'm looking out here some people I know I work with and doing many different things, and people are very reliable. If they tell you they're going to get something done, if they tell you they can do something, it's going to get done. In fact, there's some people that I deal with that are truly so reliable that if it doesn't get done, the first thing you do is call and ask them if they're okay, because you know something had to take place if something didn't get done. I have fellow teachers that I teach with that if something doesn't get done, you know something had to take place. And a lot of times when you have a lot of responsibilities, everything just falls in line and is prioritized. But always make sure that we as individuals, that we develop that reliability to where if we tell someone we're going to do something, do your very best to get it done. And if you can't get it done, just let someone know, I won't be able to do that. It's very important. It's much better for someone to understand that you're not going to be able to do it than expect you to do it and it not get done. Because in the end, someone still has to do it to get the job done. Well, here after reading the reliability, the first question we have for the students, the only question we have is identifying someone in your life who you consider reliable. In what way is that person reliable? And you think about people in your life. If someone tells you they're going to do something, or if they're going to show up, or if they're going to do certain things, think about, I know William. William used to get lesson plans for us to teach. And there was a very reliable man that brought him the lesson plans. And I'll never forget, William always made sure he was up like 5 in the morning, because that man would always come by very early in the morning, and he expected someone's hand to be there to put those lessons plans in. And, and I kind of empathize with William, because my greatest nightmare would have been for that man to come in and go, you still in the bed in there or something? Because this man was always up at 5 to 5:30. He was always up. He was always moving and always working. And I often thought, man, I would sure hate to be in his position, because surely sooner or later I'm going to oversleep. That man's going to catch me in bed. And this same man, he would call me, and I know he did others, he would call you at 5 o'clock in the morning and just start talking away. And then he would call you at 8:30 and go, I didn't wake you, did I? Well, no, you didn't wake me. You didn't ask me if I was awake when you called me at 5 o'clock this morning. Well, you should have been up at 5. Well, okay. But this is a man, he was his whole life he was like that. And everyone knew this man to be extremely reliable. And that man is the author of this program, the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. That was one character trait everyone understood about him. He was a worker, and he was a very diligent person, but his work wasn't about creating money. He was a person, his work was education. And that's what we try to just take part of that we've been taught and help others, because we see how much it helped us in our life. And, his reliability, his determination, his steadfast and persistence made everybody in here that has been using this program and around the world, it's helped our lives tremendously. And if it helped our lives, then why can it not help others? Well, it can only help it if we get it into their lives and help them learn it. Well, here at the very bottom of the page, it says, here's what it boils down to. Becoming a person of integrity means incorporating positive traits into your character. By using these traits on a daily basis, you will build and strengthen your relationship with your parents, teachers, and peers. So something, all of that positivity that we've been building on through the last 2 classes and even this class, things that we need to build up, we need to strengthen, we need to work on. Our next class, we're going to concentrate here on page 25, not that we want to concentrate on the negative, but we want to look at the things we need to get out of ourselves. So the next class, we're going to start off on page 25. We're going to start off with the negative character traits, and we're going to take a look at some of them, how they work in our lives. And we're going to find out we all still have some of these things going on in our lives, but we need to eliminate them. And by strengthening the positive, the negative goes away. We can eliminate negative character. It is possible through a lot of hard work, a lot of determination, a lot of persistence, a whole lot of honesty with ourselves and with others, and a lot of forgiveness, because we truly have to forgive ourselves and forgive others. It goes right along with self-respect and respect. It's extremely important to develop those. Without them, we'll never get anywhere. Our next class is going to be this coming Wednesday. It'll be August the 28th at 5:30. So this coming Wednesday, we'll start off on page 25, looking at the negative character traits, and we look forward to joining each and every one of you again. Thank you for joining us.